Last year, I released my first homeless challenge video as my birthday video. And since then, the homeless franchise has grown and will continue to grow because I've got loads of ideas for homeless challenges. This year for my birthday, we're going way back in time to the original homeless challenge, long before The Sims 3. There was The Sims 2 Castaway Stories. The Sims 2 story series were designed to be a less taxing version of The Sims 2 for laptop users to play without having to worry about their laptops exploding. Knowing this information gave me a false sense of security that I could just install this game on my modern PC and just go. And boy was I wrong! After spending several hours watching tutorials, reading tutorials, I eventually got it to work somehow. And now I can play the other stories games. Let me know if you want to see them, as Castaway Stories is the only one I've played. The Sims 2 Castaway Stories has two modes. A story mode, obviously, it's the title of the game, and then a more classic Sims style gameplay in an island setting, which is so cool. We're going to be playing the story mode in this video, but maybe for a future video, I could do a playthrough in a free play neighborhood. Typically, players pick from this guy or this girl to be their player sim, who has been washed up on an island after their singles cruise crashed or was raided by pirates. I have no idea, you don't get to see this part. But then I noticed this button, create your own family. So of course I had to make Crunch. It is a homeless challenge after all. Crunch Island, single, homeless, and now shipwrecked. He begins his journey floating toward the shore on a sleeper trunk and awakens, claiming he boarded the ship, no one was on the ship, so he took a nap and woke up here. Man sleeps like a log if he slept through all that. This is where I went, I've been playing The Sims my whole life. I know what I'm doing. So I started to get ahead of the tutorial and ended up doing tasks twice, which annoyed me in a different way. So I started to play the game properly. I'm sorry game, I'll do as I'm told. Once we had done a handful of activities, such as climb a tree, twice, start a fire, purchase a shelter, and pee in a bush, Crunch decided that was enough for one day, and decided it was time for bed. As though he didn't get enough sleep from his shipwrecking. And so he went to bed. Again. He did have to cut the log down twice, so maybe he was tired from that? Crunch woke the next day to find that monkeys had eaten all his food. This man truly does sleep like he is dead. He decided a bath was the best way to keep the monkeys away, because I guess his stink attracted them over. And while swimming in the ocean, he discovered fish and began trying to catch them. Monkeys hate fish, I guess, so this was the best way to keep them away. After a good meal, Crunch noticed some well-placed logs and decided those would be good for making a raft. But after putting them together, he needed something to tie them together with, but Crunch had nothing to do that with. Crunch wanted to explore the island, but was trapped by a couple of bamboo shoots. Fortunately, Crunch beachcombed for a minute or two and found a machete. What kind of beach is this? We did it again and found another machete. Just machetes everywhere in the sand. Once the bamboo had been cut down, with the beach machete we'd found, Crunch walked on through to the new area of the island we just unlocked, and found a crashed plane. I'm starting to think we're on the Lost Island. He found a map in the crash, which was great, but only the beach and the plane crash were marked on the map, and this new area. So that was kind of useless. Crunch walked to the new area and found the monkeys that had eaten all his food that morning. Crunch wanted revenge, so he set about to steal their god. But the monkeys weren't taking Crunch stealing their god lightly. But once they'd eaten some bananas, the monkeys remembered their true god was bananas, and let Crunch take the idol home, which Crunch affectionately named Spaulding. Spaulding was actually kind of mean. He called Crunch a bum for not having a job. Sure, Crunch was a homeless shipwrecked man, so he wasn't far off. And Crunch had only been here 2 days. What kind of job was Crunch meant to get? And when? And how lonely was Crunch for him to go so stir crazy after half a day on this island to talk to Spaulding like that? No wonder he was on a singles cruise. Crunch did decide that Spaulding was right. He should get a job. Sort of. He decided that dedicating some time to gathering resources would be an effective use of his time. So Crunch became a hunter because it's manly. One of the monkeys from yesterday came into camp to worship the banana god. Crunch immediately got the monkey a job, because there are no deadweights here on this shipwreck. I wonder if you'd befriended more monkeys, and then adopted them, and gotten them jobs. Could we have had a whole monkey empire getting supplies, so Crunch could focus on his quest? We'll never know, because I never did it. Once back from work, Crunch went out again to look for rope for his raft, and found Spaulding's missing eye in the wreckage. So we went back and gave Spaulding back his missing eye. Spaulding is kind of mean, as I've said, and ungratefully burped all over Crunch, and he got sick. The game kept telling Crunch that if he didn't seek medical attention, something could happen before it was too late. I was curious to see what could happen if I didn't do it, but I didn't have time. We've got stuff to do. Okay, curiosity got the better of me, and I loaded up a new save with this new guy, David. Speedran up until this point, just to see what would happen. At first, nothing. I left the man and the monkey to get up to their own devices, and he often favored feeding the monkey over himself. The game stopped telling me to find a cure and stopped making him stinky. So I wondered if anything would happen, and I just tried to leave him to starve to death. Until he did die of the illness. And the game kicked me back to my previous save. So yes, you can die in this game, and it can be from the illness that the game wants you to deal with. Now that we've solved that mystery, let's cure Crunch's illness and save him from David's fate. It was back to the plane crash, where a tree got hit by lightning, revealing a new path to a new area. This area had a little house, and a waterfall, and a bed. Everything Crunch would need to survive, including the cure. Crunch downed it and passed out. Nothing to worry about. It was probably just cowpole. Crunch awoke feeling much better, and even found the rope he was looking for. Which was great because I didn't. Spent like 10 minutes looking for the rope. Even Googled it. Crunch somehow knew how to tie the logs together to create a raft, which is a trope in survival media I've always found odd. I'm a scout leader in my spare time that I have, and I have no idea how to do that. I'd just stay on the island and get eaten by coconut crabs. Once that was done, Crunch was sick of beachside views. Too sandy. It's coarse and dry and gets everywhere, and decided it was time to move. So he took him and his monkey to the lagoon. He furnished his new home with a mirror to raise his charisma, a sofa, and a spool end table, like the game told me to. Crunch soon found the home of Spaulding, where he thanked Crunch and opened a creepy door for him, where the remaining survivors of the singles cruise were found. Spaulding remained a jerk, so these survivors went whiny and pathetic. Not a nice going away gesture for Spaulding. Crunch spoke to the survivors individually about their situation, and this lady mentioned something about her husband? Her husband? I thought she was on a singles cruise. What was she doing on a singles cruise with her husband? Survivors spoke of their problems and eventually told Crunch that the professor had been helping them get food while they sat around and cried. Why was there a professor on a singles cruise? Why were there teenagers on this single cruise? The only one that makes sense to be on a singles cruise is this finance bro, because he's insufferable. But so is everybody else. Crunch left them to die, only to immediately be attacked by hyenas. That's kind of a good sign. Maybe they'll eat the survivors. Eventually, he found the professor in this elephant graveyard, and he claimed he'd been studying the native tribal people of these islands for years, so I guess he's an anthropologist. Crunch cared little for the professor's studies, and decided that the ancient staff would make a perfect mast for its raft. The jaguar thought otherwise. But the professor simply said, "Try again, son." Crunch managed to grab the mast before the jaguar got to him again. I don't know if he was supposed to do it that way, but we did do it this way. Crunch claimed all that was left was a sail and a rudder. I felt there was probably more, but perhaps civilization wasn't masses of miles away. The survivors had made their way to Crunch's base and were annoying his monkey. Crunch fed them in an attempt to stop complaining, but to little avail. I changed him into his formal wear, because I thought it was funny, and set about to get grass clippings to weave a sail. But Crunch encountered the hyenas again, this time chasing a young girl. I'd love to say Crunch saw the whole thing, but... Fortunately, he channeled his inner bond and rescued the girl with the bone the game had said, "Why not pick this up?" Turns out the girl was the daughter of the village chief, just down the road. And as thanks, she told her father, Crunch could have the first pick of all the eligible bachelors and bachelorettes of the village. Which is a weird thing to be rewarded with, but for some reason the main theme of this game is romance, not survival. We now have to befriend 4 Sims in the marketplace, and they kept leaving, so this took forever. But once we befriended them, each of them gave Crunch a gift. Once this was over, we went back to the village chief, who then told us to befriend 4 different Sims at the harbour. Again, they all gave Crunch a gift, one including a skill in body, which I'm not sure how she did that, but once again, these Sims kept leaving. This took like 4 sim days to do. But we finally managed to befriend all the most eligible bachelors and bachelorettes of the village. Oh, and I forgot to mention, Crunch is a pirate now, which is pretty cool. The chief then told us to meet us at the hot springs, and told Crunch he could take whichever sim he wanted to the volcano party. I misunderstood this, because he wanted to ring one of those eligible bachelorettes on our new shell phone he'd just given us, and ask one of the Sims we've befriended to the volcano party. But I thought we needed to ask them in person, and I could never find them. Or they were never home when I rang them on the shell phone. So Crunch ended up befriending a whole new Sim and asking them to the volcano party. But once again, this took like 4 sim days. Crunch really was in no rush to go home once he made it to this village. The Sim in question that he befriended and asked to the volcano party was Talapua. I'm probably butchering her name. Crunch and Talapua's first date was at the volcano party. And it went very well. Even when one of the other bachelorettes got in the same hot tub. That was awkward. The village chief was real impressed with Crunch's riz, and offered Crunch some prime real estate in the village for his successful date with Talapua. This is a really weird village, and Crunch said he'd think about it. because it was a really weird thing to do. He didn't have to think about it long, because when he got home, the survivors had set up a shantytown on Crunch's front lawn, and the finance bureau demanded he sell the place to him. Crunch did not want to see his portfolio, nor his crypto, so he gladly accepted and moved into the village to be away from them. But not before I sold everything that wasn't nailed down for extra resource points. I'm starting to see how Crunch got attached to Spaulding so quickly now. He seems to hate other human beings. The villagers had moved Crunch's raft over to his private beach lots and were celebrating his moving. The sail was completed, and all that was left was the rudder. The chief offered to make the rudder for him, in exchange for retrieving a drum he'd left at the old village, which was allegedly cursed. The village chief claimed Crunch was an outsider, so he'd be fine, he wouldn't be affected by the curse. But I highly doubt curses are really that picky and choosy. The first thing to do to get the drum back was to visit the village shaman, where Crunch and him blew bubbles together. This didn't bring them any closer, as once the bubble blowing was over, he immediately began yelling at Crunch. He told Crunch that the only way to access the old village was to obtain the sacred idol and tame the jaguar. So Crunch was off to find his old friend, Spaulding. The monkeys had claimed him back, after losing their faith in the banana god. They let Crunch take him without a fight, and he returned Spaulding to the shaman. In exchange, the shaman told Crunch the only way to calm the jaguar down to let Crunch pass was to rub a sacred herb against himself and let the jaguar sniff it. This was catnip, right? The jaguar let him pass, and he was free to enter the old village. The drum was somewhere in one of these baskets in the village. But the village was full of baskets, so it was time to open them all. Some of the baskets contained urns and spooky ghosts that muttered ominous things to Crunch. Crunch was unfazed and continued to open the baskets willy-nilly, even taking the urns, because Crunch does what he wants. Turns out this was what you were meant to do. I was just taking them as trophies, but the game wanted me to place them on the pillars. I'm not sure what this did for us, but the ghosts thanked Crunch, and Crunch was able to retrieve the drum. All that was left to do was return the drum to the village chief. If I could find him. Last time we saw him was at Crunch's house. But he wasn't there. So we went to the harbour. No. We went back to the shaman. No. The village market. No. Back to the harbour. No. Back to Crunch's house. Still no. Where did he go? He apparently gave Crunch his own personal shell phone, as when I tried to call him, he claimed he did not own a shell phone. I googled the problem, and Google claimed he would be at the harbour. I was really worried the game was broken, as it was The Sims, so I wasn't surprised. But in one last-ditch attempt, we went back to the old village, where Crunch had one more thing left to say before I left. This then rolled round our goal to deliver the drum to the village chief, who was in the village harbour as Google had said. We finally completed the goal, but not before wasting yet another 4 sim days looking for somebody. A running theme. Once the chief had received his beloved drum, he declared it was luau time. I guess he wanted to show off his drumming skills to everybody. Crunch had to prove his love to Talapua by drinking the volcano water. She had rejected his kiss, so Crunch had to do what she wanted. Except it was raining, and Crunch could not light the fire in order to start boiling the volcano water. Crunch cried about it, but eventually it stopped raining and he was able to light the fire and drink the volcano water for his beloved. Next, she wanted to see him limbo, which he did with ease, as his form was way off. Then she wanted to see him walk over hot coals. He started to walk over them, only to then give up halfway across the coals. But Crunch was wearing shoes unlike everybody else, so I forced him back on there and proved himself to his beloved. She of course loved it, even if he did cheat with his shoes, and finally accepted his first kiss.
Chloe?
The chief totally ruined the beautiful moment by telling Crunch the rudder was ready and he could return to the mainland. This upset Talapua and she ran off. Read the room, my dude! Crunch was given the decision, stay or leave. Crunch slept on it and decided he was better off staying. He didn't really have anything going for him back home anyway. If he's anything like the previous Crunches I've made, he's homeless and more recently has a gambling problem. He went to apologize to Talapua and tell her he was staying, but I guess she decided to run off into the arms of Crunch's best friend, Spaulding. He had given her the same illness Crunch had gotten from Spaulding previously. The drama! When will Spaulding's jerkiness end? Crunch forgave her for getting with his best friend by making out with her in front of everybody. Nobody really cared. Except of course, this fountain, which now ran red with lava. The village chief was angry, but soon changed his mind, like real quick. Crunch promised to return with the cure for Talapua and ran off to the raft, try and get to the mainland to gain more cowpole for Talapua. But the volcano was already angry with Crunch and burnt down his sail, making the whole raft useless. The whole thing was made of wood, so I don't really understand how the whole thing didn't burn, but whatever. The professor, I'd forgotten about him, had arrived suspiciously quickly after that to inform Crunch of a secret research facility nearby that could have something Crunch could use as a sail. Crunch was mad at him for withholding information, but we'd already actually been there before, during the many, many times we've been looking for people. I'd like to say Crunch raced over there, but he was in a terrible mood, so I had him sleep, eat some food, and then he raced over there. Crunch grabbed the parachute at the research facility, headed back, and set it up as a sail. What a back and forth with this game. Once again, the professor suspiciously showed up to inform Crunch he'd never make it, and that he should try his luck with the next island over, and try to break the curse. Crunch decided his raft wasn't great, it was kind of obvious, and probably wouldn't make it that far, so gave it a shot. He needed to find the ancient staff hidden inside a petrified tree to open the door to the ancient temple and break the curse on the island and cure Talapua. I didn't massively understand, but I did as I was told. Crunch grabbed the staff, but mysteriously, his way back to the raft was sealed off to add to the drama. Crunch was forced to head in a different direction back. Soon after, Crunch found a man close to death. His name was Bart Pittman. With his dying breath, he let Crunch know his career and that the professor was real sus, and caused the singles cruise to sink on this island. And then he died. Crunch took his grave and this information and the staff and went back to the island to let the village chief know of his plan. Crunch confronted the professor at the temple, where the professor told him he was only interested in winning the race for world domination, as he was part of the Laminati. Together, they played red hands, and I was like, "Stop it, you're mortal enemies now." The professor ran off to open the door. Crunch just happily opened it for me. You'd think he'd put up a little bit of a fight, but no, he just opened it. Once inside the temple, the professor drank from a cup, and instead of getting Raiders of the Lost Ark, he reverted back to a young man. Crunch really had to pee, so I'm not sure this was meant to be his reaction. The professor ran around admiring his new riches, whilst Crunch looked on with no thoughts, as Sims do. The shaman approached Crunch, gave him a choice: punish the professor or reward him. I chose punish, as he was standing in the way of Crunch and Talapua's love. The professor sunk into the ground, and shaman congratulated Crunch on his decision. Together, they headed back to the village, where he stepped over the lifeless body of the village chief and headed to the bathroom. Once done in there, he stepped over the chief's lifeless body again and revived Talapua. The shaman appointed Crunch as the new village shaman, as he did have the staff after all. Crunch was exhausted, but he accepted. Hang in there, Crunch, we're close to the end. I assume Crunch wanted the shaman to marry them before Crunch became the new shaman, as was implied with the dialogue, but I'm not sure.
Oh, Father Silo. Oh, Revivo.
They were rudely interrupted by the finance bro and the other survivors wanting to move into the village. The chief asked Crunch if he wanted them too, but before he could answer, a helicopter landed, claiming he had a package for the professor. But the professor was dead. However, the helicopter was willing to take back the survivors, except from the two teens. They'd found love on the singles cruise and happily stayed on the island together. And so, after a few delays, like 20 minutes, I guess, Crunch and Talapua were finally married. I'd like to say happily ever after, but once the ceremony was over, they lost loads of friendship with each other and everybody laughed at them. But that was The Sims 2 Castaway Stories. I would have liked to continue Crunch and Talapua's story by having them move into a house and start a new family together. But I guess the neighborhood being bigger and having more houses and more lots was just in my head, as this is all there is. No matter, this was fun. And hey, maybe I'll come back and visit the island family sometime. Or maybe they'll advance in the future, and we'll see them again in The Sims 3. Who knows? It felt great playing an old game from my childhood, especially one I didn't get to play much as. I simply just watched my sister play through the story. I've never played any of the other Sims life story games, so let me know if you'd like to see me play them, and I really hope I can get other Sims games to work too, and then I can play them on the channel. This was, as mentioned, way at the start of the video. This was a long one, I'm sorry. My birthday video. So happy birthday, everyone, from the blessed YouTuber on YouTube, Miss Blessed. That's me. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to keep up with all my videos. But for now, it's my birthday! Happy birthday, everybody. Goodbye!